So PragerU has a lot of different programming on it. And one of the pieces of programming that is recurrent on PragerU is where like the CEO of PragerU sits down with various individuals and talks about schools. She's basically the figure at PragerU that talks about how important it is for parents to get into, the school board positions. She's the cheerleader pushing people to get into that. And she's also the person who's working to get a lot of PragerU materials into classrooms to teach the next generation of children. And so I thought I would subject you guys to approximately 3.5 minutes of one of the conversations that is put out on the PragerU channel. Because, well, it is a short clip of a much longer conversation, but the title of it is fascinating to me.
I think I forgot to hit the button.
Penny
BWA.
Penny and T, thank you for injecting some BWA into stream. I appreciate you. Thank you for helping me to continue to live and make this program. And so, in a relatively recent, it might have been like a month and a half ago or so, one of these segments, PragerU's CEO interviewed Abigail Schreier, who, and I need to stress this, is not an expert on education. She's a lawyer, and she's a lawyer who happened to leave her field of expertise in order to write a book about how trans boys are actually just damaged and emotionally confused girls. And she's a bad person. I feel like that should be obvious, but I'm just saying it out loud to really emphasize she's a bad person and has contributed to the immiseration of so many children. And she is asked about social emotional learning. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that is as we watch this clip.
One of the things I learned by talking to these researchers in the field of psychology was that it sounds innocuous. Ask a bunch of kids, how are they feeling?
Yeah.
Well, what could be wrong with that, right? They could say, I'm feeling great. The problem is their mandate is teaching social emotional learning, teaching emotional regulation. Well, if you say, great, I feel great, there's nothing to teach. So it always heads in the direction, now think of a time when you were in pain. Now
So, if you don't know what social emotional learning is, here, do we have like a succinct? Let's see here. This is one of the boogeymen that they were trying to trot out to replace DEI in schools, or like the critical race theory line. There was a brief stint where they were trying to get social emotional learning. Conservatives were trying to like sully that term. But really, what I need to emphasize here is that social emotional learning is about teaching children how to play nicely with each other. It's about teaching children how to like verbalize their boundaries, how they can play with each other more harmoniously, how they can like, exist in society with their peers and with adults. And so what Abigail Schreier is saying here is that, teachers being aware of relationship dynamics and emotional regulation, which, by the way, is super important because children need to learn concrete things that they can turn to regulate their emotions, because they haven't had time to build up coping mechanisms for, their emotions, which is what leads to temper tantrums. It's what leads to meltdowns in public. It's what leads to, hitting. It's what leads to a lot of behaviors that are considered bad. And either that there are really kind of two ways of dealing with that sort of emotional dysregulation. Yeah, bullying is another one, but there are only like two real ways to deal with this. And that is in a child. And that is largely you can correct the behavior with fear, which has been the historical way that conservatives have tended to, correct children, which is, if you have a temper tantrum, I'll hit you. If if I see you doing something bad, I'm going to yell at you. That's the typical way. When they're talking about social emotional learning, what they're talking about is instead of, making children fearful, which is the only thing at that age that can generally cut through all of those behavioral issues and get a child to behave in a way that you want them to, or you can let them be messy, but reinforce over and over and over again positive patterns of emotional regulation, which is, like, hey, are you really mad and upset and you can't really think of anything to do with your body? You just feel so angry, you're shaking, you want to scream. Well, when you feel that way, you can scream into a pillow. Instead of having a meltdown, or you can you can take deep breaths. There's a lot of ways that, like, if teachers have these skills to show kids, then the kids learn those skills and learn those patterns, and they know, well, when I'm really upset, I can breathe. And instead of getting upset and more upset and more upset and then hitting someone, I can just take time and calm down. That's what social emotional learning is. It is focused on providing kids the skills they need to regulate themselves and be in harmony with those around them. Which, by the way, makes them a lot more receptive to learning. It makes school a lot more effective when you don't spend your time terrorizing your students and instead spend your time teaching them things. And teaching them things can include emotional regulation. This is, by the way, more important with neurodivergent students, because neurodivergent students might have harder times with emotional regulation, which, they might excel at reading, but then be very, very bad at controlling their emotional responses. And it for them, it's very useful to actually teach them and reinforce these kinds of social emotional lessons. This is not about, like, the teacher is psychoanalyzing the students and, like, how did your mother treat you? No, it's which is what Abigail Schreier here is, by the way, implying. Just to recap here.
Always heads in the direction. Now think of a time when you were in pain. Now think of a time when you felt bullied, when you felt left out. And then there's a second part. So that in itself increases dysregulation.
It doesn't increase dysregulation because kids remember when they were angry, they remember when they got hurt, and they remember how they felt. And so what you're doing is just giving words to those feelings and then helping kids make a connection between those feelings and coping strategies that are healthy. This is good for kids to learn, because then they're not having meltdowns in class. When kids feel, it also, by the way, helps kids feel safe. And when kids feel safe, they learn a lot better, which is another reason why teachers have moved away from beating students. Remember when, I mean, a lot of you are young, maybe when your grandparents were growing up, a lot of schools would simply, you were talking during class, you had to go to the front of the class and get beaten with a ruler. Okay? That's how that worked. And unfortunately, conservatives have brought that back in schools in certain states. But that doesn't help people learn. It doesn't help them learn how to regulate themselves. It doesn't help them learn the subject matter. All it does is, provide some level of maybe like relief from the behavior for the adult who is doing the beating. And if you are in a safe environment, you learn better. You learn the emotional regulation skills, and that in turn allows you to better learn the material, whatever it is, math, reading, science, etc. But that learning occurs. And either they're going to learn how to be scared and learn how to hate you, or they're going to learn how to regulate themselves and learn the material. I know which I would prefer, like, kids learn, and it would be learning how to regulate themselves without fear and also learn the material. I would rather kids learn more from school, not less.
By the way, it makes it harder for kids to achieve any tasks. We know this. Focusing on yourself makes it harder to achieve any hard task.
It literally doesn't. If you have the things you need to complete a task, that makes you more effective at doing the task. Hey guys. If you don't have the tools you need to plant a garden, if you have to do that with your bare hands, do you do it faster? Do you plant a garden faster if you have the proper tools or if you just use your bare hands? You do it faster with the proper tools. And so what she's labeling focus on self is actually just focusing on what they need in order to learn. It's not being self-centered. It's understanding what you need, what tools you need in order to get the task done. That's all it is. It's just the kid version of that, because you got to learn those skills. You got to learn the emotional regulation.
At all.
I totally relate to this because I think that when I'm in a bad place, if I'm constantly thinking about poor me, poor me, poor me, what is the hardest thing I've gone through recently, right? I actually become.
That's not what social emotional learning is. It's not training children to be victims. It is training children to have the ability to not scream at you until you go deaf. It's training kids to have the ability to not, like, beat their peers with their fists. It's training kids how to do those things effectively and like have these now coping strategies that will go with them for the rest of their lives and make them better students, not just the year they learn those emotional regulation techniques, but every year afterwards. In the same way, you have to learn, addition and subtraction before you learn multiplication. Learning how to emotionally regulate is a core skill that kids need to be taught. Otherwise, they lash out. This is not rocket science. I feel like I'm putting this in very simple terms that hopefully all of you can understand.
weaker and less efficient. I can't even focus, right? Because
Right.
I'm just focusing
Right.
on how hard things are. And I'm an adult, right? So I can possibly better regulate myself.
Right.
But for a child,
So I can possibly better regulate yourself. Yeah, because you've developed coping skills. And maybe if you teach those children the coping skills, they would also be better at regulating themselves. They need to be taught the skill. They aren't born with the skill inherently.
to just take them down this direction of like, poor me, what is the worst thing I could think about
Right.
right now? And then, okay, now let's go to math class.
Right.
They need to learn how to emotionally regulate. You're just asking them to think of an example that is relevant to them because they need that because they're children. If you like children, like empathy and like understanding what that other people have unique internal lives, that's a skill that is developed as children get older. That's why young children need to be able to relate an emotion to an experience they have had. Because they do not necessarily have the equipment yet with their brain to be able to associate other people's experiences, to be able to be like, that kid is as sad as I am. You know? They can see like the picture of a sad child, right? And be like, that child is sad. But they don't necessarily know that child has the same kind of internal life that they do.
Right, exactly. And here's the thing I want parents to know. It's different with adults. So as bad as that is for adults, it's worse with kids. And here's why. Because you're sitting around with your school counselor or a teacher talking about your trauma. So now you've told a whole group of kids they've been traumatized.
Is that word trauma, by the way, used in school? The teachers are using
Sure.
this term trauma.
No. Teachers aren't sitting down in a classroom of elementary schoolers and talking about, what traumatized you? What traumatized you, Joey? What traumatized you, Crystal? Tell me about the most traumatic experience you've had. No, that's not happening. They're just being like, hey, have you ever been mad? Or, like it's literally like some Nanoland shit. Here. Oh god, it's TikTok. Here we go. No. I need the video. Give me the YouTube video. Oh man. All right, whatever. Well, I'll take the TikTok one.
I'm sure it was an accident, wasn't it, Russell? Yes, it was. Oh, darling. Are you feeling mad? Yeah. Are you feeling kind of sad, too? Yeah. You are? Yeah, you're kind of mad at Russell, and you're sad that you lost all of your bubbles there. Well, it's okay. You know what we're going to do right now? We're going to breathe in, okay? We're going to breathe in just like this. Go.
This is an example of social emotional learning. Believe it or not, this is an example for small kids of what social emotional learning is. It's not, notice how the adult in this situation, in this puppet show, is not being like, oh, what's your trauma? No, it's literally this. See, notice again, and I know that I'm being a little silly here, but the adult here is modeling the behavior for the child, right? Right? Breathe in.
And one more time.
Breathe out.
How do you feel a little better? Yeah, I know. There, darling. Yeah. Okay, well, you know what? Nana's here, and Nana's gonna take you upstairs, and we're gonna put a new clean dress on you, okay?
Now, I mean, obviously this part doesn't really happen, but like that's what social emotional learning is. That's what it is. It's teaching kids how to correctly like deal with their emotions rather than like in this clip that child hitting the dog, for example. Cuz like and honestly this is a good example in a lot of different ways because guess what, guys? If you don't teach a kid how to correctly like deal with their emotions and like a dog does something that makes them mad, one of the things that a child might do is hit that dog because they're angry. And you know what? If they don't have the skills to deal with their emotions in an appropriate way, hitting that dog could in turn get them bit. It could hurt them physically to not have those skills. So, like, it's good for the well-being of the child in basically every single way you can look at it. To know how to manage their emotions and how to interact with other people in a good way. And I know that this is just like a 3.5-minute clip, but believe it or not, we have not even gotten halfway through it yet.
Their mandate is trauma-informed care. We need to accept that most kids have been traumatized. That's what they say.
Traumatized by what?
Well, they'll say they list it's based on a study, but it's a study that's been terribly abused. So they exaggerate the causes, but they'll say anything from climate change can cause trauma.
Now, what are they talking about? Trauma-informed practices. Let's go to the let's take a look here. Let's take a look at the National Education Association's page on trauma-informed practices. Only essential cookies. Let's take a look. This is from last year. Trauma-informed practices have been a topic of interest and need for the past several years. Researchers have defined trauma-informed practices, or TIP, as a set of practices that address the impact of trauma by creating a safe and caring environment. Trauma-informed practices focus on creating a safe school culture, building relationships, and supporting students' self-efficacy. Despite the plethora of research on trauma-informed practices, sometimes research-based practices are disconnected from the daily needs of educators in the field. So what does it actually mean? Support students from the bus stop to the classroom and beyond. Using trauma-informed practices across all education spaces can help educators collaborate to support student mental and physical health. Supporting students across settings helps to foster a positive school climate where students feel safe and confident. Be intentional in supporting families and community members in understanding and using trauma-informed practices for long-term student success. Because guess what, guys? Hey, if school is seen as an intimidating and scary place, or if school is seen as a welcoming place for a kid where a kid can be safe and themselves, which environment do you think that a kid learns better in? The one where they're scared? The one where they feel alone and isolated? Or the one where they feel supported by their peers and the teachers, the adults around them? It's the safe environment. They learn better in the safe environment. Be aware of triggers. When working with members of a school community, be aware of events, tasks, or activities that could trigger a trauma response for students. Trauma can impact students and staff, therefore it is important to understand the nature of trauma and its universal practices, which is just a really fancy way of saying you don't know what any given student has gone through. And it's very nice for these two PragerU ladies to sit there and say, what do they have to be traumatized by? when the answer is obviously often their home lives. Whether it's, physical abuse from their parents, sexual abuse from like a friend of the family, or like, being a victim of gun violence in some way. They were walking with their parent from the playground and like someone mugged their parent at gunpoint. They might be very scared of guns. And there might have been a shooting in the community. Unfortunately, mass shootings are very common in the United States. And understanding that kids might bring any of that baggage, or all of it, or any kind of combination of any other kind of baggage, is important for teachers. Because if you know where the kid is coming from, if you don't make assumptions that all your kids are just perfect, coming from perfect families and perfect living conditions, you can teach them better by recognizing that they might have issues with their home lives or issues with, experiences that they've gone through. You can teach them better. Yep. Like, it's very similar to the idea that, like, free school breakfast and school lunch is really important because guess what? Students that have had food and have been able to eat learn better. And not every family can send their kid to school with a full stomach. Unfortunately, we should be able to do that, but our leadership and our political moment has not risen to that need, unfortunately. And hopefully we can work together to fix that. But until such a time as we do, that's something teachers need to be aware of. Three, show compassion, not judgment. Do not assume that student responses and behaviors that seem non-compliant or negative are purposeful and intentional. These behaviors could be the result of trauma responses. Also acknowledge educator wellness. Personal wellness is key to building a safe and supportive school culture. Now, what this means is that, number one, and this is something that I think a lot of people have experienced in schools, but might not have put it together from that bullet point. Some educators enter the teaching field and assume that students who are, loud, who don't listen, who get up and move around, are doing it because they are challenging the teacher's authority and are doing it in order to fight the teacher, right? But that's often not the case. Often not the case. Most often, a student might need to move their body because they have like ADHD. They might be mouthy because that's the kind of language that they hear at home, and they need to be approached in a different way with the material. And the other aspect of this is teachers need to take care of themselves. They need to be able to be taught how to regulate their own emotions. Because teachers that are running on empty are also not going to be good at teaching. And so this kind of combines to be like, both for the teacher and the student, be aware of your own limits and be aware of your students' limits, and understand that like they are not coming there to fight you for no reason. And that behavior that might be seen as confrontational often has very little to do with the teacher themselves personally. It's not like that 10-year-old has a chip on their shoulder specifically for you, Mr. Kerbopple. It's not that, okay? But some teachers take it personally, and that can escalate things in a classroom really quickly in a way that is unsafe for all involved. Number 4, give students a safe space to share and express their feelings. Students' ability to feel that they are being heard is important to their emotional and communication development. Help students understand that they have a voice and choice in the school environment. Make support strategies such as positive behavior plans, journaling, chill spaces, and active listening exercises available to students, which is basically just a long way of saying, yeah, some kids are going to need different ways to kind of help emotionally regulate themselves. You know, a positive behavior plan might involve like, yeah, you know, Timothy, it's okay if you get up and move your body around during class, as long as you do it in a way that isn't distracting other kids, you know? Or journaling, you know, yeah, oh, if you're feeling upset, you know, open that journal and write something down. Or a chill space, like a place where they can go to, like, you know, get out of like the general loudness of the classroom and just like compose themselves, get ready to learn, and come back. Or it can even be like a corner of the room, like where no one's going to like socially interact with them, and until they're ready to come back to the rest of the class. Or and like, these are all just examples, but one of the important things for students and really kids of all ages is this second part here, or well, actually both the first and the second part, which is, one, if you are talking to a child, one of the best things that you can say is, I hear you and I understand. Okay? I hear you and I understand. Or even better, like, I understand that you are upset. I understand that you are angry. I understand that you are sad. That is a really important thing because it makes that student, that child, feel and understand that you understand. You know, it's not necessarily a given, especially with younger kids, that they know or can infer that you understand where they're coming from. You need to say it explicitly. Okay? And being heard and understood is very, very, very important for younger students and older students too. Because, you know, what's one of like these stereotypes of like a teenager who's too cool for school? Well, one of the stereotypes is that they feel like no one understands them. And that's a feeling that a lot of kids of all ages have, even if they can't articulate it. And so being able to say that means a lot to a kid. And it helps build that rapport and helps make them feel safe. Okay? And the second part is giving kids agency, giving students agency. That's really important because having some feeling of control in school can go a long way to making a kid like school, you know? And if that kid likes school, they're going to learn more, okay? This isn't rocket science. You know, there's a reason why, like, one of the very common, like, ways of handling children, and I remember learning this when I went and like worked with kids at like at a summer camp for 2 years. But it's giving kids that sense of choice. Like, do you want to do A or B? You still control which choices are available, but giving them that choice means that they feel like they have some control, and for a lot of kids, that might be the only moment of control they feel in their entire day. So it means a lot. And when you actually address these needs that matter a lot to students, they tend to open up and they tend to like their school experience. And then they tend to learn better. That's why these policies are in place. 5, help students develop a growth mindset. Find ways to provide students with positive feedback that is encouraging and self-affirming. Positive feedback should be genuine and directly related to students. Supporting students' ability to be resilient, when experiencing adverse or traumatic experiences. Basically, if you give students feedback, doing it in a positive and uplifting way means a lot, and it builds them up to better be able to endure periods where things get bad. Because basically the entire feedback that PragerU is spreading in this tiny clip is essentially the idea that oh, well, if you make these kids think about feelings, then they'll get soft and weak, and then the world will destroy them when reality sets in. But it's actually the opposite. When you build them up, they are able to withstand more of life's pressures, and still succeed and not be destroyed. Use restorative practices that minimize punitive discipline outcomes. Restorative practices promote safe school culture and help students and adults build positive relationships. When restorative practices are present, students begin every day with a clean slate and an opportunity to learn from their mistakes. And I think one of the best ways of reframing this is essentially that if you label a kid a bad kid, they are going to start thinking of themselves as a bad kid. Gordon Guy, we absolutely are. And if a kid starts putting themselves in the category of a bad kid, they start acting out that role. They start doing the things a bad kid would do because that's what's expected of them. Instead, when you focus on building up the kid, when you focus on building up students, and when you focus on not putting them into the category of bad kid, instead, they open up and they can be anything. They can come to school any day and be better and do better and work to become better. And that's beautiful. But that can only happen if if you put the kid in the corner with the dunce cap on and have everyone in class point and laugh at them, they're not going to come to school the next day and try to be better. So you have to set expectations that those kids can be the good kid that they want to be, Bad kid as in they will become a rebel and edgy. Bad kid as in they just won't care as much. They understand that the expectation for them is low. They understand that the expectation is for them to scream and hit and fight and be mean. Kids understand what bad kid means. And they have plenty of exposure to what being a bad kid means in media or from other peers or from other experiences that they've been through. So they begin to emulate what they believe is expected of them. And instead, you can use that for good. You can expect goodness from them instead. You can expect them to live up to, a standard of goodness, I guess. If you give them the slack to screw up and improve. Number 7, build relationships. Educators can create an atmosphere of trustworthiness and transparency by focusing on building positive relationships with students. Creating a safe school culture also includes building relationships with families and communities, which basically just boils down to treat children like people. Don't treat them as inferiors. You have a responsibility over them and to keep them safe, but that doesn't mean you are better than them or that you should look down on them. Approach them with respect, and they will generally give you respect in return. Meet students where they are. It is important to remember that students who are exhibiting trauma response behaviors may not be able to fully identify their feelings and emotions. Refrain from asking multiple probing questions that require students to formulate extensive responses. Acknowledge students' feelings and give them time to respond, which is a really great thing. If somebody is having a trauma response, is having like a panic attack, is having like a meltdown, they're not like a person of any age is not going to be able to give you a really in-depth like answer for how they're doing. So why would we expect that from a child? You need to allow them time to calm down, and also to like they might not even have the vocabulary to describe what they're feeling or what's wrong. So you gotta be able to like deal with a student that has zero vocabulary or a lot of vocabulary to describe how they're doing. Don't ignore possible red flags. If you feel like students may need additional support, help connect them with school professionals who specialize in intensive student support, such as school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists, or school nurses who can help assess and support student crises. Because, hey, if you recognize that a kid is acting like kind of beyond the pale, that means that there's something wrong. Okay? It means that there's something wrong at home. Like if a kid is at school and they're doing like things that are dangerous, or that's a thing that like specialized people need to intervene with. And that might even include people needing to go check on their home life. Okay? But you as like an educator need to be able to like keep an eye out for that and to be able to respond appropriately to that. Take care of yourself. In order to support students, educators should acknowledge that their own wellness needs and the practices that they need to continue to engage in their important role in supporting students. This includes school initiatives that support educator wellness and make time and space for educators to engage in wellness. Basically, take care of yourself. 11, encourage staff to be trained on trauma-informed practices. Because guess what? Not all teachers are trained in these. Not all teachers are trained in what that means. And most people outside of education have no idea what trauma-informed responses are. Okay? Or trauma-informed practices, rather. Which is why you can get these two assholes talking about it as if it's like some scary boogeyman.
Trauma. So they exaggerate the causes, but they'll say anything from climate change can cause trauma to police tactics can cause trauma. Being born
Wait, sorry.
from climate change can cause trauma.
Yeah. When you're a kid and you learn that the planet is dying and that like the cute polar bears you see on television might not be able to exist when you're an adult, yeah, that can cause a great deal of like anxiety and fear and nervousness. And the thing is, that's true. Like that the fact of climate change is true. And so kids might be scared about it, but they need to know about it. They need to know it's happening. It's not a thing you can like hide from them. They also experience the weather, All right?
To police tactics can cause.
Yeah, police tactics can cause trauma because guess what? If you're if you're an African American child and you're riding in the back of your parents' car and police pull your dad over with pistols drawn on your car, having a gun pointed at you, as a child, you generally figure out what guns are because they're prevalent in our media. And seeing a bunch of guns pointed at your dad or at you or at your car in your general vicinity by people who are supposed to be the good guys. As a child, a lot of children, through like Paw Patrol or whatever, think that cops are their friends. You know, so that can be a really, really eye-opening experience in a bad way for a child, for a student, you know? Yeah, seeing your dad arrested, seeing your mom get pulled out of your house. Yeah, that can cause some trauma, actually.
Cause trauma. Being born black can cause trauma. I talked to one.
Well, let's be clear here. Being born black doesn't cause trauma in of itself. It's how society treats people who are black. It's the society that treats people who are black poorly that causes the trauma. Again, see the previous example of police tactics causing trauma.
Wonderful teacher in public schools who was black, and she finds it extraordinarily offensive.
Also, yeah, this happened last year. Yeah, I think maybe a 10-year-old child would be pretty traumatized for being arrested for the crime of having a full bladder while outside. Look at that baby. Yeah. On August 10th, 2023, police in Senatobia, Mississippi arrested Quantavious Eason, a 10-year-old black boy, after he urinated behind his mother's car while she was inside a local business. The boy had seen a sign that there were no public restrooms inside. Which, guess what? When you don't make restrooms available to the public, you get people peeing outside. That's what happens when you deny people restrooms. Their bladders still get full, especially if they're children. An officer in the small town about 40 minutes south of Memphis witnessed the child urinate, and after four more officers responded, took the boy into custody. Yeah, although Quantavious' mother was present, the officers placed the third grader into the back of a police cruiser and took him to the local jail, where they held him in a cell before releasing him to his mother. The police do not dispute that the child stood behind a car door and urinated as discreetly as possible. The police offered no explanation for why they believed arresting a 10-year-old and taking him to jail was appropriate for this behavior, given the circumstances. Days after the boy's arrest, Senatobia police chief issued statements admitting officers had violated department policy and training by taking him to jail. Despite the police chief's admission, Paige Williams, the Tate County Youth Court prosecutor, pushed ahead with the prosecution after the boy was cited as a child in need of services. According to the boy's attorney, the prosecution threatened to upgrade the citation to a charge of disorderly conduct if the family pushed for a trial. Facing this threat, the boy's family was offered an initial adjudication that would lead to the 10-year-old boy being put on fucking probation. Subsequently, on December 12, 2023, Tate County Youth Court Judge Rusty Harlow approved sentencing the child to write a book report and to 3 months probation, which included requirements that the 10-year-old submit to drug testing at the discretion of a probation officer and have an 8 p.m. curfew beginning just before the holiday season. The family has stated they will not accept such a sentence and will continue to fight the citation. The arrest and its aftermath have hurt Quantavious. His mother responded that in the weeks following, he requested not to attend his brother's sporting events because police would be present. His attorney declared they have scarred this boy, possibly for life. Yeah. Question, do you think that rural Mississippi police would have arrested a 10-year-old white boy for peeing discreetly behind his mother's car? The answer's fucking no. I have never in my life heard of a 10-year-old boy being arrested by police who was white for peeing in public when there were no public restrooms available. I've never heard that happen. So yes, that can indeed scar children.
That kids are told being born black in America means you've been traumatized and you have an inherited trauma. But the thing I want parents to know is if kids are
Well, yeah, you have an inherited trauma in the sense that our country treated people who looked like you as personal property for 400 years. You know? Or not 400 years. I'm forgetting. I'm having a brain fart about the duration of the transatlantic slave trade. But either way, for a very long time, that in turn leads society to treat you in a different way that scars you. Yeah.
sitting around and doing this with their counselor or teacher, well, who was supposed to keep them safe from trauma? The parents. So very naturally,
Yeah, but guess what? Not every kid who comes to school has good parents. And teachers have to teach those kids too. This isn't a private school where the school picks and chooses which kids are going to make them look good to future prospective families. This is a public school that has to teach every kid, regardless of their circumstances.
it always leads to a criticism, or very naturally, it will lead to a criticism of the family, of the parents. Because, of course, the next question is, where was your mom? Where was your dad when this was?
Sometimes your dad was the person traumatizing you. Sometimes your mom was the person traumatizing you. That's the answer to the question. Sometimes it was your dad's best friend who traumatized you. Sometimes it was your aunt on your mom's side who traumatized you. Sometimes it was a sibling who traumatized you. And sometimes, like, the parents just don't know. Sometimes there are acts beyond a parent's control to keep their kids safe. Like, I'm sorry, but acting like, oh, well, you know, because you had parents who let you be traumatized, you know, well, you know what, sucks to suck. No, teachers should be able to teach those kids too. This is disgusting to me. Like, this is so disgusting to me because it is directly an attack on those kids. This is directly an attack on the future of children as a concept.
Was happening? Oh, she didn't have time to help me.
Abigail, why do you think the system is doing this? Is it just
Why do you think the system is doing this? Because not every kid comes from like a fully functional home. That's why. Some kids don't even have fucking homes. They live in homeless shelters.
a thing that is snowballing out of control because people are just losing right for wrong, the ability to discern what's the right thing to do for children? Or is there a nefarious
What's the white thing? I mean, right thing to do for children?
industry that is trying to break the family, over medicate children, empower the government?
On
What's
this
your hunch on
episode of
that?
Between Two Karens.
Yeah, no kidding. Very knifey duck. Thank you for the $5 dono.
Great question. It's an important question. Is this on purpose? Is this as people acting together? Here's what I'll say. As a journalist, I try not to speculate.
I cannot stress this enough. Abigail Schreier is not a journalist. Okay? She is someone with no journalistic training. She is someone who does not do journalism. She just writes shitty books sourced from the most transphobic people she can find. And then she has her career sustained and perpetuated by these far-right propaganda outfits. That's it.
On things that I don't have proof of. And here's what I have proof of. If you wanted
What do these people want to do to kids who are from broken homes and or are homeless?
They want them to fail out of school and go to jail and become prison labor. That, like, you might think I'm being facetious about that, but unironically, that is the served purpose of the school to prison pipeline. In their mind, like, the school system is supposed to fail kids from bad homes. You know? Bad kids are supposed to fail, and then they'll get what's coming to them.
to break kids down emotionally, if you wanted to break them down, there would be no better program than the program now in schools that goes under the headline mental health.
Yeah, because you know what helps kids learn? Not having any kind of mental health care. That helps kids learn so good. So enraging. Hey, what if we gave, like, I just to reframe all of this really quickly, what she's essentially saying is, what if we only gave kids half of the medical care that they needed? She's saying, I think kids would turn out better if they only had half the medical care they needed. Do you guys understand how insane it is to say, yes, well, obviously you should have medical care for any any body issue, but not anything for anything that's going on in your brain. All children have fine brains. What an insane, disgusting, and horrendous thing to advocate for. I've been dreading doing this segment for a long time because I knew it would make me so mad. Like, you guys realize how mad that made me, right? We just spent like an hour talking about a 3.5-minute clip. Anyway, fuck PragerU, and this material and these people belong like so far away from schools. No person involved with PragerU should be allowed within like 500 yards of a school. Disgusting.